Hey everyone, it is Friday. It is Sunrise Extra time.
Morning.
Good morning, guys. We've made it through another week.
Phew.
Look at this.
Yes, we have.
I got a sunburn that's now like an itchy, rashy sunburn from sitting outside on the front porch yesterday.
It doesn't take much.
It doesn't.
Yeah, it sure
Is that on
doesn't.
your neck?
Yep. Did you get one too?
I noticed that earlier in the show. I would never say anything, of course, but I said, what's going on with it?
Wait a minute. How is the one with the darkest skin the only one with sunscreen on? Did you guys not put anything on before you set out?
I didn't. No, I didn't. No. I just, there's no easy way easing into it.
I barely went outside yesterday, to be honest with you.
Oh, my God.
Maybe I'm just the oldest, Nina. I got to preserve whatever's left.
Okay, we have a fun morning or day, whenever you're watching this, really, because there's a cool announcement today. We are starting a new podcast here on KGW. It's called Under the Big Umbrella with Matt Zaffino. Do we have Mr. Zaffino live from home? We were trying to, he wasn't quite hearing us. Oh, he can't hear us quite yet, but we do have his picture, so we're waiting to see if we can figure that out. There is the podcast that launches today. It's on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts, Under the Big Umbrella, where Matt is recording, different weather and outdoors topics, even touching on music and climate change, and yes, imploring people to not go do big hikes or big adventures out in the outdoors right now during coronavirus season.
So, Nina, after you
fun,
told
here's
me
a
about
photo
this,
of Matt.
oh, look who there. Look
Oh,
who's
that's a
there.
live picture. He just can't hear us. He looks so cozy.
Yeah, he is. He's comfy. I've worked with Matt for like 30 plus years, and I think I've seen him up this early and doing something for the Sunrise Show, if I'm remembering right, like one time.
One time.
He is such a night owl.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, after you were talking about this and this new podcast, I binged listened on my way home yesterday. And so there are 4 episodes up. They're really digestible little nuggets and super interesting. I loved the way he broke down the different topics. So it's not like a huge, commitment of time.
Right.
Like I said, I probably have a 15, 20-minute ride home, and I had them all taken care of. Loved them.
Yeah, they're they're designed to be short, just kind of, we in the industry like to call them snackable content, however lame that sounds, but between 2 and 7 minutes.
Snackable.
Snackable. And so, darn it, I hope we can get him so he can hear us, because we can spy on him while he's sitting on his chair. I asked him yesterday when we interviewed him, what time are you waking up these days? And he said about 8:30 now, because he doesn't have to take his son to school, and they're just doing homeschool stuff.
How come he just can't call us on the cell phone? We can put his audio up to get started.
That's what we're trying to
That's what they're trying to get him to do.
Yeah,
It's like
I guess that's what we're
herding
trying to do right now, is what Director Brian said.
Yeah. While
It would kind of destroy the whole plan for Sunrise Extra if we couldn't get Matt on, right?
Right. Well, I was going to say, Drew, what can you, you're doing Clash of the Comedies right now. Today we had 2 landslides, really.
I don't know if you can appreciate it, for starters, what I'm trying to do here. I try to frame something in my TV. I actually pause the end of our Sunrise TV show so that it's just kind of sitting on the KGW logo there behind me. Always trying to do my best for the Sunrise Extra presentation. But yes, as we wait for Matt, we can update our viewers on Clash of the Comedies. This is the weeks-long battle of funny movies that we're putting on. We started it this week. It will continue next week. First-round games are happening right now. And we did have Nina's pick earlier this morning, which was Bridesmaids, crushing the 40-year-old virgin. And we hadn't had a blowout in this Clash of the Comedies until that matchup, Nina. And then we launched our second game of the day, and it appears to be another blowout, because Rod's pick was Arthur, the comedy from the early 1980s, and it's going up against a 1970s classic in Animal House. And Rod is now kind of like, I don't know, I feel like he's backpedaling a little bit, because he's saying, oh, Drew, I didn't say that this was my pick to win the whole tournament. You just asked me what my favorite comedy was of all time.
I do think
What's
he
the
was
difference,
correct,
really?
right?
I said, Rod, you... Yeah, I felt like he... basically, I said, hey, Rod, you can put any movie in this competition that you want. It is your comedy of choice. He went with Arthur. It's now getting demolished by Animal House. And he's like, well, I didn't think it would win the whole thing.
Well,
the
you
only
asked
thing
him
I
his
think
favorite.
of Dudley Moore for is 10 with Bo Derek back in the 70s. I don't think I've seen much else that he's ever done, including Arthur.
He was in The Santa Claus, Brenda, and that's the
It
only movie
was.
I think I've seen with him.
I remember watching Arthur actually as a little boy back in the early 1980s, and it was funny. What was funnier, though, was when we were going around and we were texting each other a couple of weeks ago about which comedies we wanted to put in this field. And Nina, I think you went said either Caddyshack or Bridesmaids, and we went with Bridesmaids. And then Brenda, you had a couple of choices. You ultimately landed on The Hangover, which I thought was a terrific pick, and I cannot believe that The Hangover got bounced yesterday by Groundhog Day. We could talk more about that if you'd like in a moment. And then Rod chimed in with Arthur, and I think we all, even though we weren't together, I think when each one of us received that text, we looked at it, yes, it just kind of made us chuckle. Because if you go back, if you ever do watch Arthur, it's like you're watching the Rod Hill that we know and love.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
almost kind of like an imitation of Rod.
Yeah, it was perfect. Okay, breaking news. We have the man himself, the man of the half hour, Mr. Matt Zaffino. We are glad to see you, my friend. Where did you just go?
Whoa,
Can you hear us, Matt, at least?
Hey guys.
Hey, there you
Yeah, I can hear ya.
are. We figured it out.
Hey.
Oh, which kitty is this?
Hi. This is Quattro, and he had a late night last night, so he's chill.
Oh, love it, love it. This is what Sunrise Extra is all about, Matt.
Yeah.
So you have a podcast.
Yeah, well, you
debuting
said
today.
jammies, so I'm wearing jammies. My
I
polar bear
know.
jammies. That's all I got at 6:40 for whatever time it is.
Whatever time it is. It's 7:09 right now. Tell us about your podcast, Under the Big Umbrella.
Yeah, so it launches today. We're really excited about it. We've been talking about this for a while, and my idea for a podcast was obviously to be able to talk about weather and climate, which is my thing and my passion, but also to have a bigger umbrella and be able to talk about kind of anything that's interesting. You guys know that I'm really passionate about the outdoors. I do a lot of things in the outdoors, be it hiking and climbing and skiing. And so I want to be able to talk about that, or music, or anything Portland, or anything Northwest, or anything that I think that people would find interesting. So that's how we came up with the name Under the Big Umbrella with Matt Zaffino. And we've got 5 episodes that are ready to go right now, and we're pretty excited about it. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Hey, Matt, I have to say, I think you killed it. I was telling Nina and Drew that I binge listened yesterday on my way home from work. I listened to everything that you had up online right now. My favorite was about the outdoors, you know, and you had this refrain in this particular segment about it's not just about you. But it was about, I mean, I know you're a huge outdoors person, and that is your passion, that's your heart, but you were making such a good case for why people shouldn't go out, even into the middle of nowhere, where they think they're not going to run into, you know, much of anybody. Is it possible that you could just kind of give us a little flavor of what that episode was like? Because you made me think, and you know, kind of put out a few details that I honestly had not thought about before.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that's my favorite one, too. And thank you for listening, by the way. I think you're probably binge watcher number 1. And maybe that's it. But anyway, I appreciate you doing that. So, yeah, it's the idea behind that is if you go out in the backcountry, nobody ever thinks they're going to get injured or get in trouble, need assistance, or need rescue. But if you do go out and you do something that's ambitious, let's say you decide to climb Mount Hood, or, you know, before this whole COVID thing happened, we had, 3 deaths in 3 weeks, I think, on Mount Hood? And at least 2 of those were individuals who went up and went skiing on their own. So first of all, that's always a bit of a higher risk if you go out on your own. But if you do go out and you require assistance, you are just unleashing a whole avalanche of risk that you may not even think of, because if you end up having rescuers, search and rescue people come out after you, you're not just exposing them, you're exposing their family. It's virtually impossible to do search and rescue work and practice good social distancing. I mean, you have to get close to people. You might have to do CPR. You have to handle them. Not only that, it's hard for them to wear the kind of gloves you're supposed to wear, a face mask, all of that, when you're huffing and puffing, climbing a mountain, that kind of a thing. And then here's the other thing that I found most interesting as I researched this is, search and rescue people, they tend to be really healthy people. They tend to be fit. They tend to be strong. So those are exactly the kind of people who could be carrying COVID and showing no symptoms at all. They could be completely asymptomatic. So now it's not, as I said in my podcast, it's not just about you. They could be exposing each other and everybody around them. And so it's all about the exponential growth that happens when one person exposes not just one, but 10 others, and then they expose 10 others, and suddenly you've got 1,000 people that have been exposed that otherwise would not have been.
Yeah, those are all really good
I would like to jump in
Go
here
ahead,
and ask
Drew.
Matt a question.
Yeah.
And this is hard. I'm sorry, Matt. You probably know
Andrew.
the deal with this TVU setup. The little tool that we use to go live from our homes. We're on a bit of a delay, so it's hard to know when to jump in on this Sunrise Extra talk. But Matt, podcast is sort of the latest thing for KGW. A few years ago, we became the KGW Media Group and not just the TV station, right? Because you can consume our content through social media, through YouTube, still on TV. And now we're doing podcasts, and I believe this is our fourth one because Ashley Korslund has the True Crime podcast. I know Laurel's Straight Talk is also now a podcast. Our sports guys do Blazers 3-on-3 Talk as a podcast. So did the station twist your arm to get you on board with the podcast deal, Matt, honestly? Or was this something that you were kind of looking forward to doing, thinking about for a while?
Yeah, Drew, I always love talking to you because you ask great questions, and I will be honest with you about that. I had been thinking about doing this on my own for quite some time. To be totally honest, I was thinking of doing it outside of the station channels, just on my own. And I don't know what that would have looked like, if I could have got it sponsored or whatever. But then KGW said, hey, you should do a podcast. And I was like, yeah, I've kind of been thinking about it anyway. So the answer is yes. I had been thinking about doing it on my own. They came to me and said, hey, are you willing to do this? And it didn't really require any arm twisting. I thought it was a good idea, something I was thinking about doing anyway. As you well know, Drew, and everybody, all of our coworkers know, we always are doing more and more and more. So that's okay. This is more to the viewers than to answer you. You know this, Drew, but we have to be on all platforms. We have to meet viewers where they want to be met, where they're watching, where they're listening.
So, Matt, the format of this little, streaming show is that we are watching live comments come in on all platforms, like you just mentioned. So, one of our loyal Twitter viewers, his handle is Men in Pajamas. So he very much appreciates your look this morning.
Perfect.
He says life is better in pajamas. Someone called Yes, That One Tom wants to know where he can get a pair of those pajama pants. But back to the material at hand, our other great Twitter viewer, Dotes Magoats, says, wow, such good points. Thanks for sharing. I will have to go binge the podcast now. She's talking about those coronavirus concerns. And Amanda on YouTube says, thank you, Matt. That's a really good point that people often get overconfident. It's not going to happen to me, but Search and Rescue knows that you can't predict something like that. So people appreciating that perspective that, yeah, I wouldn't have not thought about.
And Nina, we have one more on our Facebook stream.
Well,
this is from a viewer, handle A Little Clarity. She says, Matt, this is what terrifies me about joggers whizzing by me at the park, breathing heavily and just like really quickly past. She's worried about what you're talking about. They're super healthy. They're out there, could be asymptomatic. And it's just something that, she thinks about as she's out and about trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, don't get breathed on would be my answer to that. I mean, in terms of running and jogging, those are low-risk activities. The odds are really low that a runner is going to be out there and break a leg and require a bunch of search and rescue people to attend to them in close quarters and not practice social distancing. But it's a good point. It's a good question because I've been out and about and have had runners, and as a former runner, I get it. But I think runners need to be careful to avoid people and not get close. And if you're not the runner, you're the walker or sitting, whatever, try to keep space between them as well. And it's tough with runners because they're not only breathing heavy, they can be like slinging sweat, you know. I mean, you know, it is not an activity where you're going to be keeping your droplets to yourself necessarily, which is what we all need to be doing. So I would encourage runners to just be uber respectful of everybody around them. And most of the runners that I've seen have been doing that. But, you know, it's easy for people, and not just runners, for everybody, to forget about social distancing. And, you know, you start in a conversation, you know, let's say a neighbor, and you're 6 feet away, and then, you know, a few minutes later, they're 3 feet away, and then the next thing you know, they're breathing on your dinner plate. So it's something that we all need to be mindful of for sure.
Matt, one of your podcast episodes was about climate change and how you really wanted to kind of keep doing some more podcasting about that. And you and I were kind of talking about, and you know, are very honest in that little episode, saying, you know, not a lot of like on-air meteorologists want to take a side on something like that. Can you kind of talk about your view and what do you hope for the podcast in terms of like talking about climate change?
Yeah, you bet. You know, so, you know, climate change, I think, is, other than coronavirus, the biggest issue of the day. I mean, and obviously COVID, rightly so, is taking, you know, the top spot and over everything else. It has to. But climate change is such a big issue, and it's something that I've been studying really my whole career. I remember professors at the University of Utah, you know, this is a long time ago, telling me that this is going to be a big deal, and this is something that we're going to be dealing with more and more and more of as we go forward, and they were right. Professors aren't always right. Usually they are, but they were about this. And I've been going to conferences every year through the bulk of, almost every year through the bulk of my career, where we talk at length about climate change and to experts. So I've been a student of this for a long, long time, and so that's where I'm coming from. But in terms of it as a social issue, I just think it's the biggest issue of our day. It is literally changing the planet, and maybe not as drastically as COVID, but it's changing. It's going to change and is changing the way that we do business and the way that we live on this planet. So most people in this country, believe it or not, and for better or for worse, get their scientific information through television meteorologists. You're talking about climate, so it's something we have knowledge about anyway. So I just feel very passionate about the fact that we should be providing this information to the public. Now, a lot of television meteorologists don't want to do that, and I understand why. Our job, as you well know, in television is to bring everybody in, as in don't alienate anybody. And there are people out there who still are very skeptical about climate change, so a lot of television meteorologists have shied away and just don't want to talk about it. I totally understand that. I respect that. But for me, I don't think it's something, I just feel like I can't ignore it, and it's something that I think a lot of people want more information about, and so I try to provide that to them in a disciplined way, in an honest way. I mean, there's a lot of information about, not a lot, but there is some climate change information that you need to be skeptical about, and skepticism, by the way, is a very healthy part of the scientific process. It's a necessity in the scientific process. That's why research papers are peer-reviewed before they're published in credible publications, because peers will look at a piece of research or an article with a very skeptical eye and then give feedback to the author. So skepticism is fine. It's necessary. I embrace that. But this is an issue that, you know, the facts are basically in. It's real. It's happening. It's us. And I just don't think it's something that can be ignored, or that's not something anyway that I choose to ignore, and I think it's something that people have an appetite for.
Matt, it is so cool to have you on Sunrise Extra this morning. I actually just kind of find myself getting lost in what you're talking about because it is so interesting. And then I realized, oh, I'm actually a part of this broadcast right now. I better chime in. So I look down. Every once in a while, I look down at my monitor to watch you, and all I see are your socks, your feet, and your cats. But I want to talk about your son for a moment. So for starters, quick question and update. Enzo is how old right now?
Here. How old? What? My son?
Yeah.
Enzo, I said Enzo is how old right now?
Oh, sorry, yeah, I missed that. Enzo is 7 now, yeah. So second grade, or
you find
finishing
yourself,
what would have been second grade, and we are busy with with homeschooling, as everybody is.
Do you find yourself, though, because you just talked about the dangers of someone going out there and trying to participate in outdoor activities and getting hurt and then needing medical attention. I've noticed with my 12-year-olds, and you probably are doing the same thing with Enzo, it's like, I don't want them going outside right now and getting hurt either. I tell them all the time, hey, listen, you better stay intact. We're not, if you come in with an injury, it's going to have to be something dismembered before us to go to the emergency room. And I'm like so nervous. Every time I hear someone screaming outside or crying in the garage, I'm like, oh no!
Yeah, it's a good point, Drew. So, and we have a trampoline now, and most physicians shudder when you say trampoline, but you got to give them some outlet, right? And we actually have a quarantine pact with another family that we set up at the beginning of this, so that we are homeschooling with one of Enzo's school buddies. Her name is Vivian, and so the two of them. And it's been great because he's got a buddy and it makes the learning process easier, and so we're able to alternate days that we're homeschooling, so it's not all on my wife every single day. So that's our setup. The thing about Enzo is, and even with all the adventurous stuff we do, and he loves to get out and hike and he loves to ski, he just happens to have a pretty good cautious filter. He's not a guy that goes hucking himself over cliffs. He's not the kid that's, jumping off of, rolling down the hill when there's a street below. I mean, he's got a pretty good filter when it comes to stuff like that, but it's a really good point, Drew, that we don't want to be doing, all of us in our daily lives don't want to be doing something where you're going to need hospitalization. It goes back to my point of my podcast about outdoor recreation. Thankfully, or hopefully, most of the stuff we do in our daily lives isn't that risky. So, hopefully we're not heading to the emergency room with a broken femur. But it's a really good point, and we feel the same way. It's like, uh-oh, what was that, And it also comes down to like a basic thing like, ooh, I'm flossing. That filling feels loose. Better make sure I don't pull it out, that kind of a thing, because you just don't want to have to be part of the medical process these days.
Exactly. Hey, we have a great question from viewer Amanda McDonald on YouTube. She loves that you're taking on the climate change topic. She wants to know what kind of sources that you turn to regularly kind of to keep up on the latest.
Was that with climate change?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, there's so many good sources, and I kind of straddle the line between things that are easily digestible by the public and then more scientific literature. For that, I go to a site called realclimate.org, which is a great clearinghouse and it's wonky, it's technical stuff, but if I'm researching an issue, that's one of the places I go to first. I also rely on NASA and NOAA quite a bit because they both have excellent, they're doing original work and they have excellent research. There's just so much out there. National Geographic is a good source. Who else do I go to? Those are probably the main ones. I mean, and honestly, NBC News. We get a lot of good stories that come across our feeds from NBC as well. But I look towards more of the scientific ones. The American Meteorological Society also has great publications on it as well. And then there's an outfit called Climate Central that provides that specifically provides content for television meteorologists. That is also a good source. And I don't blindly rely on people. I know the people behind Climate Central. I've known them for years. The same thing with some of the other organizations that I go to.
Matt, thank you so much.
Yes.
We've got to wrap up because Brenda has to do a Today Show cut, and we really appreciated it. I like your second cat peeking up there. There was no room for him on the sofa, so he jumped down a couple times. Thank you to Quattro. Thank you to Matt.
Come back again, Matt.
Yes, check out his podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Under the Big Umbrella with Matt Zaffino.